What's going on, everybody? All right, here we are on Monday. I love these videos on Mondays. You guys know I love hearing from others because we all bring a different perspective. We all have different knowledge and skill set. And when we bring those things to the table, it makes for some really interesting conversations. Now, I am in the California, Northern California right now. It's got a massive storm coming through. So if my house collapses from this wind, or if the roof caves in or the power goes out, I will just keep on going because nothing will stop me from talking about these topics. I want to remind you that the topic from last week is a topic that I get lots of eye rolls on. Whenever I say anything about value or prices, a lot of people just go, oh boy, here we go again. I'm a collector, I'm not an investor. I really disagree. It doesn't matter if you're a collector. It doesn't matter if you're an investor. Values matter. And the reason that values matter is because a lot of us, most of us, don't buy every card and keep it until we die. Most of us have cards, and after a while, maybe we go into something else. And maybe we end up selling our collection. Maybe this card and this card and this card we trade in and get this card. If you're ever going to sell a card, or you care about the people who do, then values definitely matter. And as a collector, even if you don't care about those things, I still think it matters, because if these are things that you're thinking about buying, then you want to buy them before the value potentially goes up. If the value of a card is going to go up 50% over the next year, and the value of another card is not going to go up over the next year, then why wouldn't you want to buy the card that is going to go up before it goes up? You would wait on the cards that you don't think are undervalued and underappreciated. I could talk about this topic for hours. And some of you are saying, well, I have a feeling you're about to. Well, I'm not going to go for hours on this, but I could. And I do think that valuation is important to everybody in the hobby, and because of that, because of the certain things are overlooked, will they always be overlooked? A lot of people say, there are certain players that during the pandemic really took off. And you say, well, why do you think they took off during the pandemic? And a lot of people say, well, they finally, they were always overlooked and now they're not. Well, I think it could potentially be more, than that. I think that there are a lot of things happening with the hobby, with the economy, with the world, with society, and all of those things are kind of reflected in how we spend our money, the way we spend our time. And our hobby is a microcosm of all of these things. It's a microcosm of the economy. It's a microcosm of society. I mean, it's no wonder that Josh Gibson cards went way up over the last few years as Major League Baseball started to adopt more and more of the stats and the records. And that's a whole nother conversation. But if those things change and perceptions of different leagues change, or different players change, or different teams, or different sports, or different non-sports, it's going to affect the hobby. It's going to affect the interest. It's going to affect the demand. And as a result, it's going to affect what we can and can't afford. So I'm excited to hear what all of you had to say about things that you feel are undervalued. Does that mean we're right? No. Does it mean we're wrong? No. Does it mean we could be right or wrong? Of course. These are just speculations based on different perspectives. And let's face it, a lot of us are going to say the things that we like and we're buying are probably the undervalued things. Like if I were to say vintage basketball cards are undervalued, well, I'm guessing that I'm a person who's interested in vintage basketball cards or been buying them if I'm going to say that. There aren't a lot of people that are going to say, those things over there are super undervalued, but I'm not interested in them. I'm not buying those, but they are very undervalued. Like most of the people who make a suggestion have a little bit of a vested interest in that particular market or section of the market. And so that's certainly part of something to consider as we're hearing responses. Does that make them wrong? Does that make them biased? Does that make them trying to be pumping up something that they have? No, they're just simply sharing what it is that they think is valuable and undervalued or underappreciated. It's sort of like, when you say to a friend, hey, if you had $10,000 to buy some stocks or mutual funds right now, what do you think's a good buy? Well, they're probably not going to tell you, oh, go buy Apple or go buy Intel, but I haven't been buying any of it. It's a great buy right now, but I haven't been buying any of it. And they're going to tell you what they've been buying. And that's, I think, normal. All right. There were a few responses that had common overlap that were mentioned multiple times. There was one area that was mentioned the most. We'll talk about that. There were several that were mentioned by a couple of people. And then there were a lot of things that were mentioned once. And I'm only going to cover, a handful or so of the different areas that were mentioned. But again, I really think that if an area is undervalued, it doesn't matter if you're a collector, if you're an investor, or anywhere in between. It matters to all of us, because if you're potentially going to buy these things at some point, you probably want to buy them before they shoot up and skyrocket.
Some people said it's vintage football cards. The first comment says, it's been said before, but I think the biggest corner left untapped and undervalued is vintage football. I can be more specific by saying something like Jim Brown non-rookie cards are absolutely affordable right now. A lot of his mid-grade cards, 4 to 6, go for $100 to $250, and the pop counts are actually pretty low with some of those sets. You can own every vintage card of his for an incredible price. You can get an SGC 5 grade complete 11 card run, including his rookie card, for around $2,500. The guy was considered one of, if not the greatest football players for decades. Even both of my late grandparents, one a lifelong Browns fan and the other a lifelong Steelers fan, said he was the best they had ever seen play the game. Some of his cards look awesome. The 59 tops, he looks like Superman standing there. The black bordered 62 tops is sharp. The short print green bordered 63 tops is really nice. I like the 64 Philadelphia too. It looks fantastic in an SGC slab. It just seems like vintage football is so far behind vintage baseball right now. Maybe we will see a little bit of some leveling out in the future. Another one says, to me, the most undervalued thing in the hobby today is vintage football. I find it absolutely amazing that modern and ultra-modern football is the most popular cards currently collected today, and the NFL is currently the most popular sport, yet vintage football is mostly ignored. Will people eventually find vintage football more appealing, move into it, and values of those start to increase? I have no idea the answer to that question, but only time will tell. And finally, this one says, great question. I and probably others think that vintage football is undervalued. Now, the 65 Namath, 57 Star, and 58 Jim Brown, among others, certainly aren't cheap and will take saving for, but I feel like dollar for dollar, and if you found a comparable all-time great Hall of Famer in football and compared them to someone similar in baseball from the same era, the baseball card would have more eyeballs on it and thus more demand and may command a higher price. And this is despite what seems like more vintage baseball cards out there to be purchased at shows. Maybe there were smaller print runs of football and historical collector base, fan base of vintage football is just smaller than baseball.
All right, so you knew I was going to like a lot of people saying football cards. And I know that there are a lot of people who disagree, and this is a point of contention for a lot of us. And the beauty, again, as always, is if you don't agree and you don't think they're undervalued and you don't think they have long-term value, then you don't have to buy them. If you don't like them, you don't have to buy them. I've gone round and round about my hypotheses about what I think is going to happen with vintage football cards. You know, I never saw Bart Starr play. I never saw Jim Brown, Sammy Baugh, John Unitas. I never saw any of those guys play, but I still love football. I mean, I love watching football. And a lot of the youth do too. I mean, it is by far the number one sport. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It's fast-paced, it's hard-hitting, it's great for television, it's exciting, it's dynamic. So I thought as I was kind of talking a little bit, I'd show you a few quick cards of mine. I don't show my football cards a lot, but a good amount of my collection is football. Here's my Jim Brown rookie, 58 tops. Love that card. Hard to find this centered. Well, commonly has lots of snowing. How about an Otto Graham rookie? Guy went to like 10 championship games. Love that one. Gale Sayers, one of the most dynamic runners of all time. Great story, great person. That's a Sayers rookie. I got my John Unitas rookie. Got that one, I don't know, what, 3 months ago, something like that. How about a Sammy Baugh rookie, one of the top quarterbacks of all time, one of the first real passing quarterbacks. Started making football not just a running game, but a passing game. I'm still looking for his Bowman rookie as well. But then some other cards, like I think this is like a fourth year Sayers. Maybe it's a third year. That's a third year Sayers. His first tops card is 66 to 67 or Philadelphia. Here's a third year Jim Brown. So this is a beautiful third year Jim Brown card in a PSA 4. You can get this card for like $70. 1960 Jim Brown in a 4 for like 70 bucks. How about a third year John Unitas? His rookie's in 57. This is a 59. Again, this card is under $100. This one's in a 6. How about this Sammy Baugh? This is a 2 Bowman. 52 Bowman, Sammy Baugh. Beautiful card. Got that at Strongsville last year. How about a second year Bart Starr? I don't have a Bart Starr rookie yet. His rookie card's the 57 set, just like it is Unitas's. There's a third year Bart Starr, 59. Those cards are crazy affordable when you compare them to their counterparts in other sports. And, you know, again, I understand that a lot of the rule changes have affected the stats and affected the records in football. You know, it's so much easier for quarterbacks to throw now than it used to be. The pass interference is unbelievable now than compared to what it used to be. The technology is so much better now than it was, that it makes it really, really difficult to have any of those guys' old stats hold up now. And so most of these all-time greats, like these guys I just showed, they're not in the record books. And because they're not in the record books, it's hard to remember that they exist, because how else are you going to know that they exist? And I understand that, you know, and a lot of these guys, they played football, so their bodies are beaten down. So you don't want to wheel guys out on wheelchairs at the Super Bowl to say, hey, yeah, here's such and such legend who's completely broken down now because of the sport that you're about to sit back and watch while you drink a beer. Like, they don't want to do that. So they don't do that a lot. So a lot of these guys kind of get forgotten. But, you know, I will continue to say that I think that I believe personally that vintage football has a lot of upside because it's the number one sport right now. And young kids, who do they collect? What do they collect? They collect football cards far and away the most. And what's going to happen is, I think, just like I grew up collecting, you know, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90 Topps baseball cards. When I got older, I'm not buying those. I'm looking back at the legends. I'm learning the history of it. And I know that people say, oh, yeah, but again, Greg, the history of this sport, there's not a lot of film on some of these players. You can't watch video of Bronco Nagurski, you know? You can't watch video of some of these all-time great guys, Newt Rockne, because that was before that. And there's not a lot of evidence and there's not a lot of stuff to get caught up. I do understand that. But the relevant thing doesn't really work for me. Saying that the old football players aren't relevant because their stats aren't relevant, I don't go with that. I mean, if you look at some of the turn of the century sets, like, you know, some of the Allen and Ginter and some of the Duke sets and some of these tobacco sets, some of the hottest cards right now are non-sport cards. So one of the sets, you know, some of the sets have guys like, you know, I'm trying to think of Mark Twain. Mark Twain cards have gone way up over the last 2-3 years. When was the last time you read a Mark Twain book? When was the last time your kids read a Mark Twain book? I mean, aren't a lot of Mark Twain's books banned in schools because of some of the language in them? So why would Mark Twain cards go way up in value if Mark Twain isn't really relevant in our current society? Because he's historic. You know, Thomas Edison cards have gone way up. Well, yeah, we use electricity every day. We use light bulbs every day. You know, so if we use light bulbs every day, he's relevant. Is he? I mean, I don't know. I should ask my students. Do you guys know who Thomas Edison is? But his cards have gone way up. Way up. You know, Abe Lincoln's cards have gone way up. He's not president anymore, but he's still relevant, I guess, because his cards are going up. So to me, you know, if Mark Twain cards are going up, if Albert Einstein cards are going up, if Thomas Edison cards are going up, but there's not really anything currently happening with those guys, but their cards are going up. What that tells me is that people are interested in our past. They're interested about learning these historical figures and what they did and what their contributions were and what they were all about. Even if all of them are dead. Even if they're dead, people still are interested in them. So why wouldn't they be interested in Johnny Unitas? Why wouldn't they be interested in Jim Brown? Why wouldn't they be interested in Gale Sayers or Bart Starr or Sammy Baugh or Otto Graham? So, yeah, I agree. Their stats don't hold up. I agree that some of the technologies that Thomas Edison came up with have been improved. I mean, we use fluorescent lights now, not filament light bulbs. So, well, doesn't that mean that now Thomas Edison is completely irrelevant? No, it doesn't. He still contributed in the progression of where we are now. So just because their stats don't hold up, just because they're not on our TVs in front of us, I still think that those guys have a lot of potential when it comes to their long-term future.
Another popular choice was Diamond Stars cards. This one says, I believe the most underrated set with the most upside potential is the 34-35 Diamond Star set. It's crazy how low the prices are in relation to the beautiful artistry and great pre-war players included within. As for the most underrated, undervalued card, I'd say it's the Tony Perez from the 68 Topps 3D set. The only other Hall of Famer in the entire set is Clemente, who sells for a king's ransom. Considering its rarity and cool factor, the Perez card sells for just a fraction of what it should. And another says, my answer for this week's question is the 34-36 Diamond Star set. I think the Art Deco design of these cards is absolutely beautiful. Each one of them are like a little work of art. In my opinion, this is one of the most colorful and coolest cards ever produced. I always have wondered why they don't sell for more. Just because there isn't a Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig in this set shouldn't affect the value of a truly eye-popping, incredible set design.
All right, the Diamond Star set got a couple of shout outs. Now, if you're not familiar with the Diamond Star set, first of all, this was in the middle 30s, so a lot of people are interested in making that leap, going from the 50s and the 60s and maybe starting to dabble in pre-war. But when you think of pre-war sets, a lot of those are very, very expensive. A lot of the ice cream card sets are very rare, making them very expensive. The 33 Gaudy set is very expensive. The T206 set is a little bit, well, it kind of depends on the card. Well, with every set, it depends on the card. But a lot of people don't really know about the Diamond Star set. So as I'm talking, I'll put a few pictures on the screen so you can get an idea of what it's all about. It's got beautiful colors. It's kind of got this Art Deco look. And so people aren't as familiar with it as they are the T206 set or the 33 Gaudy set. And one of the questions is why? Why aren't people as familiar with it? Well, if you look at all of the iconic sets and the most well-known sets and recognizable sets, it's like 52 Topps, right? 51 Bowman, T206, 33 Gaudy. And what do they all have in common? All of those have in common an insanely historic, iconic card. The big cards are sort of like, they're sort of like the anchor for sets. If a set doesn't have a massive card in it, it's a little bit less recognizable to people. You know, if you just throw out a random set to people, you say the 54 Topps. Well, a lot of people can picture it because they picture the Hank Aaron rookie card and the Al Kaline rookie card and the Ernie Banks rookie card. You know, but you say the 58 Topps set, and it's a little bit less recognizable for some people. What about the 50 or the 66 Topps set? I think I know that one. But if you say 68, where there's the Johnny Bench and the Nolan Ryan rookie card, very recognizable. Well, the thing about the Diamond Star set is there's no Gehrig and there's no Ruth. Because there's no Gehrig and there's no Ruth, there's no massive card. Also, because the 33 Gaudy set is right before it, a lot of these players' first cards or first mainstream card has already been released. So when you think of what's a big time card for Jimmy Fox, we picture the 33 and 34 Gaudy. When we think about, Mel Ott, you think about his 33 Gaudy. He's got two 33 Gaudy cards. When you think about those players, you're kind of drawn to the big set, which again is anchored by the Gaudys with these 4 Ruth cards, with these couple of Gehrig cards. And so what happens is when there's not that massive card in a set, it makes it harder for people to kind of remember. And then I think it goes overlooked. Now, this is a gorgeous set that has a lot of the best players from the era. But because it's missing a couple of the best players, it doesn't get the recognition that it really does deserve. I think it's a great choice. I think that I could totally see interest growing in it. And why would suddenly interest grow? Why, if it's been overlooked for years and years and years, is it suddenly going to grow and it won't be undervalued anymore? Well, one of the reasons is platforms like this. Platforms where we can share it with each other. We can learn from each other from situations exactly like this. A couple of people saying the Diamond Star set allows me to now present it and show a lot of people what it's all about. And some people are going to watch this and go, that really is a pretty set. Maybe if I want to start doing some pre-war, I should go there. That's the difference, because for years and years and years, we were familiar with the sets, again, that have that big card. This doesn't have a massive card. It has a lot of big cards, but not massive cards. At least it doesn't have any massive cards yet.
Another response were second-tier Hall of Fame players. This first one says, "Feel better, Greg. To me, 50s and 60s Hall of Fame pitchers not named Koufax or Ryan are the most undervalued. As the game changes, pitchers with 300 wins are going to be as rare as pitchers with 500 wins are. Cy Young has the most unbreakable record with 511, but we may never see another 300-game winner. From Spawn and Carlton to especially guys like Necro and Wynn, the cards are cheap relative to position players in the Hall. 24 pitchers have 300 wins. Verlander leads active players with 262. Scherzer has 216, and Kershaw, the baby of the group, at 37 has 212. Every other active pitcher is at least 147 wins away. I think at some point these heroes of a bygone era in the game will be appreciated, and the cards will appreciate more than the hitters who are already priced higher. I think the number stays at 24 forever." And another says, "When you consider that the vintage collecting space is dominated with post-war Hall of Fame collections, I believe lesser, non-inner circle, or second-tier Hall of Famers are significantly undervalued. Among many collecting communities to even sports talk radio, the conversations are dominated by the GOATs and GOAT debates. It's almost like you feel hearing about a petting zoo, such as Grant's Farm, instead of hearing about sports and cards. Sure, people are attracted to greatness, but many great and enshrined players are ignored because they're not a GOAT or a top whatever list. Oversimplifying players and their 10 to 20 year careers into commonly a couple of sentences doesn't help either."
Oh man, I absolutely love this response. I love this response. You know, if I had changed the question, and the question was, who are the most overlooked players of all time? And just start with baseball. You know, whose players are the most undervalued? A lot of people would say guys like Whitey Ford. They would say guys like Kaline. They would say guys like Harmon Killebrew, Orlando Cepeda. You know, a lot of those second-tier players. A lot of the guys who aren't the best of the best. And how insane is it to even say that? I mean, Kaline is probably the second best Tiger of all time. Yet, he's insanely affordable, other than his rookie card. Ernie Banks would be another one. I mean, you could go on and on and on with the list of players that were all-time greats, but they're not that top tier. When you look at guys from the older turn-of-the-century type sets, it's like, you know, Cobb, Mathewson, Wagner, Cy Young, Walter Johnson. But even a guy like a Nap Lajoie is much cheaper. I mean, they named the team after the guy, but he doesn't get the same level of love. But for back to the points, it's like if you look at pitchers, you got like Koufax and Nolan Ryan, like were mentioned, but all these other guys like Carlton, like Gaylord Perry, like, I mean, I could go through the list. We all know the list. Bob Gibson even. And in a lot of cases, you say, no, Bob Gibson's expensive. And, oh, no, Kaline's expensive. Ernie Banks is expensive. You know, well, their rookie cards are expensive. But anything that's not their rookie card is crazy affordable. And this is just with baseball. I'm just talking baseball cards. Yogi Berra, Johnny Bench. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And to even call some of these guys second-tier Hall of Famers seems insane. But if it's not Mantle, if it's not Mays, if it's not Aaron, you know, you might even throw in Clemente. a Koufax, but those guys that aren't the absolute top of the top, that and was mentioned in the comment, in the consideration of a GOAT, then they just get overlooked. And it's not just the second tier players, it's the second tier cards. So like Jim Brown's rookie card, it's an expensive card. Now comparatively, I don't think it's as expensive as it should be. But I've got these cards out in front of me and I'm like, again, this is his third year card. This is a beautiful third year 1960 Jim Brown card. It's like a $60 or $70 card in a 4 for his third card. Now his rookie's expensive, but his third card is that cheap. Here's a third card of Bart Starr. Now Bart Starr's rookie card is expensive. You're going to pay up for that. But his third card, this isn't a 5.5. I mean, you can get this for a little over $100. That's crazy. It's his third card and it's from the 50s. One of the best QBs of all time. Third card of Gale Sayers. This is a 1968 Gale Sayers. You could buy this card for $40, $50. It's a 6. So it's not just, okay, one more. Back to this John Unitas, third year John Unitas, 1959 John Unitas. I mean, this card in a 6 is, between $100 and $150. In a 6, John Unitas. So it's not even to me, it's anything second tier. The second tier player, again, I feel weird even calling a guy like Ernie Banks or Kaline second tier. But that's the way that the world and the market seems to see it. Because the drop in value from Hank Aaron, I mean, a Hank Aaron rookie card versus an Ernie Banks rookie card is a huge drop. A Hank Aaron to an Kaline is an even bigger drop. And those cards are all from the same set and they're all equally appealing looking. But the Hank Aaron is what? 3 times the cost? 3 or 4 times the cost of Ernie Banks and Kaline. Now, I think Hank Aaron is an all-time great. I do think he's a GOAT. I think he's a top-tier guy. But to go from him down a little bit, let's use Whitey Ford again. The 51 Bowman set has the Mantle rookie, has the Mays rookie. It also has the Whitey Ford rookie card. And a thrashed Mantle is going to be thousands. A thrashed Whitey Ford might be what, $200 or $300? That's crazy for one of the best pitchers of the decade of a multi-world championship team. There's no doubt that those guys are overlooked. The question then becomes, will it ever change? Well, I guess what would have to happen is the Koufax rookie and the Aaron rookie and the Mantle and the Mays and those top tier guys would have to get so unaffordable that people look elsewhere. If I want to live in a certain neighborhood in town and the cheapest house is unaffordable, I got to go look at the next neighborhood. And if that top tier neighborhood has completely breached my wildest dreams financially, I got to go look at the next tier of houses and neighborhood. And I guess that's what would have to happen. And in some regards, that kind of has happened. Will there suddenly be a jump in prices? I don't think there will suddenly be a jump in prices. But it feels to me like right now more than ever, if you're not a GOAT or in that conversation, your stuff, you can hardly even give it away. It is the absolute best time in all of my years of card collecting to be buying guys like Whitey Ford and Yogi Berra and Johnny Bench and Gaylord Perry and Orlando Cepeda and Frank Robinson and Don Drysdale and Brooks Robinson, and the list just goes on and on and on. To me, it is an absolute golden opportunity to be buying those cards of those players right now, especially if it's not their rookie card. Because anything but their rookie card is so affordable, it's kind of hard to believe.
This last one gives insight that maybe an entire category is overlooked. This one says, great stuff, Greg. This was a really interesting discussion. Since it seems others have the vintage football angle covered, I'll throw out a wild card. Jack Johnson. I know boxing will never be as popular as other sports, but the fact that you can make an argument for Johnson as one of the 5 most important athletes in American history could eventually earn him some more hobby love. When he became the first African-American heavyweight boxing champion in 1908, Johnson became America's first true black sports star. At the time, that was more of a curse than a blessing. Johnson has numerous amazing pre-war cards, and relative to his historical importance, most are still pretty affordable in low to mid-grade. In terms of why I think his stuff could jump in the coming years, it's a matter of his story becoming known by a wider audience. HBO is currently working on a 6-part miniseries about Johnson's life, starring Mahershala Ali as Johnson. If that series is well done and younger sports fans begin to understand Johnson's importance, I think demand for his stuff could grow. Thanks for taking the time to follow me down the rabbit hole on this.
This is a really, really good response. And there are about 5 directions I want to take this one, and I'm going to really hold back. I think Jack Johnson is a great choice. I mean, one of the biggest names, biggest superstars in boxing. And this is a time when boxing was absolute king. I mean, for a long time, the heavyweight champion of the world was sort of just like this superhero, this real life superhero, all the way up through Holyfield and Tyson. But if you go back years and years, it kind of ended. I mean, Lennox Lewis was kind of like the last guy where everybody knew who the heavyweight champion of the world is. Right now, if you ask me, I don't know. But for 100 years, the heavyweight champion of the world was a bad dude that everybody knew. And this is also when cards were kind of starting. And so I think early 1900s Jack Johnson cards are they are overlooked. They are underappreciated. And why? Is it because people aren't really into boxing anymore? Maybe. UFC has really affected boxing because when you talk combat sports, UFC has completely taken over. And I think now boxing is very much in the shadows. So is that why? It certainly, I think, has a lot to do with why boxing cards aren't worth more. But part of it is, again, we don't really know a lot about that. One of the reasons why Muhammad Ali was so well known is because it's when everybody had a television in their home. That guy was a marketing genius, a self-marketing genius especially. He was well-spoken, he was articulate, and he was exciting. And he was like the right person at the right place at the right time. But a few years before that was a virtually unbeatable guy in Jack Johnson. And so why is he overlooked? Well, he didn't have the TV. We don't have the clips like we do for Muhammad Ali. Now, will that change? I don't know. I don't know if that'll change. But for what he was and when he was that. Now, another rabbit hole I want to go down are some of the African American superstars pre-1950. Which Jack Johnson is. Now, my buddy Orlando at A Collector's Dream, he's mentioned several times Isaac Murphy, who was a jockey, who was just like, I mean, I'm pretty sure they named the trophy of Jockey of the Year after the guy. I mean, he was an absolute superstar in a time where that was not the case for African American athletes. Jack Johnson is another one. Will there be a time where there starts to be more appreciation for some of those early African American athletes? If so, I think those two guys would be two of the first people that they would point to. And don't underestimate, like as mentioned, the HBO miniseries. That stuff is a big deal. I mean, it's not an accident that during the boom of Jordan rookie cards happened to also coincide with the Last Dance miniseries. That absolutely has something to do with it. Some Jeter cards jumped during a Jeter miniseries. When Yogi Berra documentary series came out, that helped his cards. Whenever there's attention, it affects and usually bumps up demand. So I could absolutely see that happening. Boxing cards in general, it's interesting that considering those guys were absolute superstars of their time, that those cards aren't worth more. You know, Jack Dempsey, John L. Sullivan, you know, some of these dudes were incredible athletes and world known. You know, they were known around the world, and their cards in like a 2 or a 3 for cards from the 1800s are like $300-400. That's kind of crazy. I think that's a great choice. Again, there's a lot of places I could go with that response because I think it's such a good one. Now, I've kind of kicked around a few ideas for my question for this upcoming week. I've changed it a couple of times. And one of the things that I will do occasionally is I'll ask a question that I've asked before. And I don't think I've asked this question exactly like this. But one of the reasons that I like to ask things that maybe aren't brand new questions or concepts is because I know that we're all evolving in the way we collect. And our opinions change, you know, what things matter to us, what sports we collect, which players we collect, which eras or years we collect, because we're all changing. Which, by the way, give yourself permission to let go of some of that stuff that you're not excited about anymore. You know, at times you just got to cut the line and rebait a new hook. And that's okay to do that. And if you want to let that thing go and move in a different direction, you can. And, you know, my buddy Dylan, Double D Vintage Baseball Cards, for years and years and years, he was a collector of Pack Fresh stuff. He wanted high grades. He wanted cards that were sharp. And then he literally went through and sold almost all those cards off and went fully on centering because his opinion changed. His preferences changed. And again, that's okay. So my question for this coming week is really on that basis. When you are collecting cards, there are really 4 main categories, right, of vintage cards that matter. Now, if you're a modern collector, there aren't really 4 main, these categories. It's collecting modern, collecting vintage is different because some of the issues, some of the things that came up with printing cards and cutting cards years ago are not so much problems in the current environment of card production. And so because of that, it makes, I think, collecting vintage cards very interesting because there were so many different types of flaws and so much time that transpired that could allow so many different types of issues to come up after they were pulled from a pack. So my question, it really is this. Of the 4 main areas, with vintage cards, what's the most important to you? Is the most important thing to you corners? Is the most important thing to you the surface and having no wrinkles and having no paper loss? Is the most important thing to you the registration and making sure that it's super sharp? Is the most important thing to you centering? Now, I think all of us would agree, well, they all kind of matter, right? It's just, I wouldn't take a card that's 100-0 centering, Greg, but I do prefer corners. I understand that all of us care at least some about all four of these things. But if you had to pick one, if one of these things was the most important, you would never buy a card that was severely off-centered, or you'd never buy a card that has heavily rounded corners. You'd never buy a card with poor registration. You'd never buy a card that is all creased up. What's the one? What's the one thing that matters most? But most importantly, I'm curious as to why. I think this will be really interesting to share your responses next week. Why is that the most important thing? So tell me which of those four is most important, but also why is it the most important for you? Because I think it might be kind of eye-opening to the rest of us how we all have different preferences when it comes to which flaws we can accept, but also why we can't accept some of the things that we can't.